Hello everyone. Welcome to this International Coaches Week 2022. My name is Sat Khalsa. I'm the co-director and the co-developer of Innermost Shift coaching model along with my partner Siri Khalsa. Okay, she's
Hi.
here. And we are living with a mission to help people get the very best they can from every single moment, from every single thing, and in the whole life as well. So we are in the field of training and coaching, and we've been coaching around people using NLP and other tools. And then for the last more than 1 decade, we have made our model absolutely in line with the ICF competencies. Now, many aspiring coaches who are in practice or wanting to become coaches, when I talk to them or they interact with us, we find that they get amazed by that how some of the coaches in different fields and different walk in different niche, how they make their game of coaching so exciting and so wonderful. And whereas they find that they are quite repetitive, quite monotonous. So, what are those things that the outstanding coaches do in this effort? We have invited the coaches from world over in this International Coaching Coaches Week 2022, and we are interacting with them. We are getting insight from them and helping our coaches and people who are in this field to become more enlightened about whatever they can do in their field. So, be it executive coach or life coach or any coach you are, every coach has some framework, some structure, some strategy in mind. And for the last 3 days, if you are listening and you are interacting with us, you are watching us, or you knowing that how people approach the organization individual with certain mindset, because coaching is a game. It's a two-sided game. And why do we call it game? Because game is what make the whole scenario exciting, whole journey exciting. So coach has a goal, the client has a goal, and they're both working with that commonness in one field. So with this effort we have today, one of the wonderful coach we are about to introduce to you, and she's from Canada. Let's invite her. Yeah.
Hi.
Siri. Hmm.
Welcome,
Hello.
Heather.
Thank you.
So,
I'm happy to
Heather
be
is
here.
thank you so much for being here. So, let me just introduce you. Heather is the founder of a co evolution culture by design, a company to help companies to co create a high functioning culture that aligns to their strategies to drive exponential measurable results. Heather, with her team, drove results that surpassed expectations in sport, tech, media, film, TV, social enterprise. Results that also include achieving year over year recognition as Canada's top 100 employees for 15 years plus as a part of the leadership team at the Toronto International Film Festival, while driving 15% annual revenue and audience growth and securing the largest naming deal in the Canadian history and rebranding the entire organization. Wow, that's amazing, Heather. And with the first hand knowledge of over 15 years of working with many high functioning teams, it was clear that the common baseline of success was people, purpose, and the process. And if strategy was the what we were driving for, our culture was the how we got it done. Very, very beautiful. So, Heather, today we have this topic which we have chosen for this week is games coaches play. So, what do you have to say about this, especially when you're helping the clients to achieve the best in a given moment?
Oh, well, first, thank you for having me here, Siri Sat, and to your viewers and listeners. I'm thrilled to be a part of this conversation, and I love this format that we are having a conversation. And to answer your question, what I have to say about that, you summarized it a little bit, which is people first and process to support the people and
Mhm.
passion towards the work that you're doing, the mission that you are driving towards. And so that is really at the fundamental core. And I learned that from my mentors. I had the good fortune in my very first quote, real job in my early 20s, to have been mentored by a man who led that and a team that had that philosophy, where there was a high level of trust, a high level of accountability, communication, and and process. We believed that process was absolutely liberating to creative freedom, to innovation, to resiliency and responsiveness. But underlining all of that, coming back to the coaching and the games coaching, is the core foundation of values. And I reference that around the values of trust, respect, collaboration. And I can go into lots of examples of how those live out in various entities that I have worked in and led in, and also clients, but just to top line it for you there.
That's great, Heather. Now, let's understand that the game, we have to keep a game in mind or play a game. Okay.
Yeah.
So I learned that you play a wonderful game of bringing cultural transformation through coaching. Okay. So that's what attracts the client or the teams or the organization.
Yeah.
So how do you go about it? Like, how do you make it absolutely compulsive, and that they want to go for it, they want it, they want to enter into this game of changing the culture, transforming the culture. So how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And how I answer that question today is very different than 3 years ago. And because absolutely, number one, today in our post-pandemic, if we can go on a leap to say that it's post-pandemic world, the number one driver for culture transformation is the employee. They are demanding it. As we all know, our work has changed. We're sort of in this third industrial revolution. People are demanding fulfillment in their work. They're demanding an alignment between their personal values and the organizational values or the culture. They're demanding their own self-actualization. There's a much greater awareness of self, I believe. I know I'm talking broadly and generally, but it is happening. And so they're demanding it. So organizations have woken up. They are waking up. The second reason, and I think maybe it is important to go back to what a broad definition of culture is first. I've got two other reasons. And broadly, or a definition that I subscribe to for culture, is it is the values, beliefs, and behaviors of current leadership, as well as plus those values, beliefs, and those values and beliefs and behaviors that are embedded in the system from the prior leadership. So what often happens is an incoming leader might not recognize the impact of legacy of those that came before. And then it is the expression within all of these policies and procedures that exist within the organization. And the extrapolation or extension of that is such that culture is also represented by the worst behavior that the leadership team is willing to tolerate. So you can have the most beautiful set of values, you can be nodding your head, you can have what you think are streamlined, effective processes. And if you tolerate that just for example, the shining salesman who brings in all the money, but is dismissive and rude to people, doesn't meet deadlines, knows that he's bringing in a ton of money and can get away with anything. If you tolerate that, then that's the definition of your culture. So that then informs the second key reason why organizations need to pay attention to culture, is that it makes good business sense. It has been proven time and time again that culture is a competitive advantage. And there is a wonderful book that I am constantly referring to called Firms of Endearment. Yes, the last edition came out in 2014. And I'm anxiously awaiting their third one, which to come out after they do the analysis from the pandemic. But it's one of the most comprehensive longitudinal studies over 15 years of global leading companies, and proved that a leadership that was driven by love, that was driven by people first, and they use the word love, which there's only another individual, Mark Crowley, who's written a beautiful book, Lead from the Heart, which is, at the time he wouldn't say love, but they're saying love. And even McKinsey Consulting, in a webinar a year ago that I watched, that they asked, I'm digressing, but they asked, what do they think was the greatest leadership deficit globally? Was the absence of compassion and empathy and understanding, and that they had to change towards a leadership of love. So this book has proven companies that have a healthy workplace culture outperform the S&P 500 consistently. They outperform all of Jim Collins. We know the book Good to Great, and Jim Collins did those wonderful studies. They outperform all of those companies, and they outperform America's greatest places to work. And it's culture that is the key determinant of the variable. So it makes good business sense. And my third motivator for people in terms of taking on coaching culture transformation is you can measure it. So people often still think that culture is touchy-feely, that it's woo-woo, and it's not. You can absolutely measure culture. And we all know that what gets measured gets done. So from a coaching standpoint, the pandemic has created a real opportunity to be able to have a faster conversation, whereas it might have taken me a year to try and get people to understand and appreciate how to bring in coaching to help with culture transformation. It's happening much more quickly for those very reasons.
Wow.
Very nice. So you have to ask something?
No, you have something?
Yes, I was just wondering, when you have been doing this for a while, Heather, and since you mentioned the pandemic, obviously these last 2.5, 3 years have been it's been so different for everybody, and many people are also figuring it out, what has to be done. The organization, halfway people are in the offices, halfway they are at home. Still, the things are not going to be the same what they were earlier. So what do you have to say that what is it that the organization has to do consciously now, especially to look at the culture? Is it going to be the same, or is it going to be different? Or what do you think about that with your experience when you were doing earlier and now?
Yes, organizations absolutely must make a conscious effort to look at culture, and our work structures have absolutely changed. I do want to say for good in both ways. Like,
Right,
we're not going to go
absolutely.
back to everybody working at the office. And yet
Right.
the challenges that organizations there's so many challenges they're facing with the haves and the have-nots. Some people are happy to work at home. Some people it's their only social interaction is to be at work. So there's so
Right.
many different variables, and organizations need to, again, I come back to process as a process and strategy as an opportunity to help navigate the uncertainty of what you're dealing with, which is to understand where you're at right now and where you want to go. And to also, very importantly, to just start where you are, because there's never going to be a perfect time to consciously explore and address what needs to evolve in your culture. It's always, it's an organic process. It's living as your system and your organization is living. It ebbs and flows as people come and go, but you need to have a strong foundation of values to know, for example, who are the people that you want to hire that are aligned with the values that you want to espouse in your organization. Who are the leaders that also need to have those values? Who are the board members that have to have those values? I was part of a volunteer organization when the pandemic hit nationally in Canada in support of arts and culture. And one of the number one challenges for executive directors in navigating the stress of the pandemic was lack of support from their board, because they were not aligned, and the board was panicking, and executive directors felt abandoned. So board, and that's just from certain types of organizations that have boards, and other private companies don't. But it really is start where you are. There's never a perfect time. I'm dealing with a client right now who was very concerned about diving into this work because the board wasn't aligned with the staff on values. There had been huge attrition as a result of COVID and burnout. And so she knew that she needed to hire and replace people. And it's like, everything needs to get lined up. And my partner and I were, no, you just got to start where you are. It's going to be fine. It will help.
So it's kind of a mixed culture and evolving still with this new pandemic and whatever has happened. So we have to kind of just move, as you said. It has to be organically, it has to be organically built, of course, and letting the values remain as the ground foundation for it. Yeah, very, very well said.
Okay, Heather, I like that the three things that you said, that fulfillment, love, okay, and like,
Compassion.
yeah, compassion, and in whichever way you have put it,
Yeah.
they are the key drivers. Okay, and whatever, and it can be even measured, but whatever you and the results you deliver, and the culture can be measured. Now, my question is that, in alignment with what is happening nowadays, when people are at different places, so what is the way to now assess that what is the current culture, and like when the things have fallen apart and there is distance?
Oh, okay. Very good question. If I understand, what is the way to now address the current culture when people are working from different locations? You don't have a cohesive togetherness. And what I offer up is the beauty of our internet world now. It is absolutely possible to first, as I really believe process is a very supportive entity in the midst of chaos, and measuring your culture can be done. You work with a particular tool that literally takes 10 minutes. We ask 3 questions. What are your personal values? What are the current organizational values? And what are the desired values? And I'm going to do this, which is silly. I'm sorry. This is the easiest way without a PowerPoint chart. But so, for example, and you can do this online. You can do this with 5 people. You can do it with 5,000 people or 50,000 people. Globally, in a city, it can be done. And if your personal value, so when an organization or a team is high functioning, the personal values, the organizational values, and the desired organizational values are pretty closely aligned. If you have 10% or less in terms of a disconnect, that's a healthy functioning organization. Now, when your personal values are here and your desired, how you want to work, let's say post-pandemic, we want to have cross collaboration. We want to trust people. You're not in the office. I can't see your face. I don't sense your body language. I'm reticent, or you're not returning my calls. You don't answer my emails, etc. Or the tone in texting and emails. So if everybody identifies, we want to work like this, here are my personal values. We really want the organization or the team to also align with my personal values. But if the current culture is down here, you've got a massive gap. And when you have that gap, what measuring your values will allow you to determine, well, what is it that's gone wrong? Why don't we trust each other? And so coaching allows the facilitation of the conversation to identify, well, what does trust mean to you? What does accountability mean to you? Because it means one thing to me, and then you can find out, well, it means this to me, but to 80% of the company, it means that. And so you can determine from that what are the behaviors that need to change, and how do we get these much more closely aligned? They don't have to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect, but you just want to, you pick the top 3 values that are causing the greatest disconnect. And typically that's trust, accountability, communication, and teamwork, collaboration. And so you pick what's the biggest thing to change. And then as you have your culture tool, you can practically see how it's evolving. And then, okay, next month or 6 months from now, let's focus on innovation, because we said that was a high value and that's the core of our business, but we had to fix our trust issues first. Now let's focus on how we can be more innovative as a team, because that's why I want to work at this company. And I give that example for, the culture at TIFF, for example, was very entrepreneurial, very fast-paced, extremely innovative, and very strong on process and accountability. And I had a member of the team who actually was not comfortable with such an entrepreneurial pace. And she ended up deciding to leave, which was great because her personal values were more aligned with working at a packaged goods company, where there was a lot more of a type of structure, and every 6 months this happened and every 3 months this. It was a little bit different. So fundamentally you can measure and assess where you're at right now. And the fact that we're all disparate, it doesn't change the opportunity of the process, but it changes how you respond to the outcomes.
Okay, so if I could understand you correctly, what you're saying is the way to assess the culture, even post-pandemic, or when the people have now dislocated themselves from the one boundary to the different location, is that you use one particular tool wherein people assess their own values, the personal values, and then they find, okay, these are the prevailing organization values and these are the desired values. So these are the 3 things that you align with. Now,
Yep.
This just triggers one thought in me that, like, how do you make the organization actually accept this fact that the personal value of the people has to be respected? Because if an organization is not giving any damn to, they say, okay, well, we can understand the current and the desired, but why do we care for the personal values of the people? Let's talk business. So
that's a very, very good question. It's a very good question. And so again, it depends on the lens where that is coming from. And I'll give a couple. It's probably easiest when I give a couple of examples. In one example with a private company, and it was a global company in manufacturing, nursing bra manufacturing, and the owner understood that there was some discontent with certain staff, and basically said, you know what, it's my company. I'm going to do what I want to do. And if they don't like it, they can leave. So the individual did leave. And so the cost and the impact on that particular business was, churn, money on HR, rehiring, retraining, all of that. A similar example with another, and this is a, from a coaching standpoint, sometimes you coach people that it's okay to leave if your values aren't aligned and the owner doesn't want to do anything. And she was working for a tech company that was making money hand over fist, and the owner refused to donate and have philanthropic activity in the community in which their employees lived. And and she expressed her views, other staff expressed their views, and the owner was like, nope, don't want to part with my money. So she had to leave because she couldn't stomach going to work every day in that kind of culture. The flip side is that many leaders don't understand how to affect and respect the values of their employees. So they get that, okay, yeah, I appreciate the information, but I'm in this lane of the business planning that I'm used to. I haven't got a clue how to increase staff morale. And there's another example I'm dealing with right now where a frontline staff are really burnt out, but they're loyal to the business. They love the business, but they're burnt out. And the senior leadership team at the end of the season, which was 2 weeks ago, decided to have a party. But this frontline staff is still working there really, really hard. So there was a tone deafness to the culture that you're only sort of celebrating 80% of the organization and 20% feels like you don't understand them at all or respect them. And this particular CEO felt terrible, was aghast, and just needed some practical information about how do I actually correct this and also change it moving forward. So simple things that they don't have, sometimes they just don't have the tools, and they need coaching not only to have their own self-awareness developed and intuition and sensitivities, but they need some practical, executable ways of remedying what are systemic and policy challenges. If that's helpful, I hope.
Yeah, definitely. I was just wondering, I was in fact talking to one of the girls today. She's a software engineer working in an organization. She said, I joined the company in 2020 when the pandemic just began. It was just a month earlier. And after that, she says, we have been working from home because she's a tech company and she's into software development. And she says, I haven't met anybody in the organization for 2 years because obviously you have not gone to the office. And now also people prefer to work from home. Some people even have, given up the office spaces because they find it much easier because your cost is reduced. So at the same time, when such people, and she says, I'm not feeling good and comfortable in the organization because I'm working with a team whom I don't know. There's no interaction because I haven't met them. Right. So what do you think about such people? Because right now, when the whole situation is different and people are not meeting, they're meeting very less still. So what do you think about the future? How's going to be a future? Where do you build this culture? Where is it going to come from when you're not meeting people? You're just working in your own space. So what do you think about the future? How it's going to impact?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I feel for your colleague who's going through that situation, as many people are. I'm very hopeful for the future because I believe that these when there's an awareness around the challenges, and that's half the challenge, is getting the awareness of the disconnect and the dissatisfaction to come to the surface. And when you're aware of it, you can do something about it. And as a leader in that situation, it just rings with another client as well. I just had this conversation yesterday where the team said they went to their manager and said, we need some team building because we're just working so hard and we just need to get to know each other. Because we don't have the time to get to know each other as human beings and people. And so that's what I would offer to your colleague. And to, when I think about the future of work like this, that there are means and ways so that people, if they're in the same geographic location, leadership has to figure out, how do I facilitate a gathering where people who are still uncomfortable being in a gathering without masks or in a large gathering are respected, where there's opportunities for people to congregate. So in a park, just find ways and means where, depending on the size of the company and the amount of financial wherewithal, to be able to book out. I know with one company I was at, we booked out the whole lodge and everybody had their own private room. And so there are ways to create connection. Other ways, and I don't know what they've done. I'm sure they've done it, but there are ways to facilitate, even if it's through digital, as much as, together would be better. It might be a silly example, but one thing that a client did was they all did recipe sharing every Friday, like for one Friday of a month. People cooked their own dinner. They all got on Zoom and then they shared what their favorite recipe was. So you kind of got to know a little bit about the person, that kind of stuff. So
Okay. All right. So, yes, Heather, um, when you talk about the word called love, we understand it totally and completely. And even in Trillion Dollar Coach, the word love has been highlighted. And we understand that in our model also, we talk to people that, okay, let's understand from you that how the force of love, how the love is the force for good. How do you use love as force for good? Like whatever you love to do, you do everything possible you can do. And our model, we bring this value very, very in a unique manner. Okay, to begin the people, we activate people to initiate people to their own beingness, where they understand that my love, my uniqueness, sense of connectedness, compassion, my contribution, and my all answers must come from this space. Okay, now considering that fulfillment is everyone looking after, looking for, but there are different set of values drive them to fulfillment. So there are personal values you talk about, then you talk about the current values, and then the desired values. Is there a central value system that you think that you must be there, and I think one must align to those things, or is it that you leave totally to the people that they decide? Okay, these are our desired values.
Ah, excellent question. Well, so the central values
Yeah.
that are critical to working in an organization is trust and accountability. And there has to be a common respect and understanding and alignment around what does trust mean and what does accountability mean and what is respectful expression. So individuals can come to the table at a particular work environment. Let's take a software company, SaaS, for example, and they can come with their own what their own personal, like maybe someone is an artist and they're working in the tech company and they really would rather be a visual artist. But how does that person still find an alignment with their personal values working in a company? And that's the work that has to be done in terms of the connection around how the values of the company support the individual. It's not to say that a company has to morph and respond to the individual passions and agenda of an individual. That's not it at all. It's about how do people find fulfillment and satisfaction in their work and joyful productivity, which comes from feeling fulfilled, which comes from your own self-actualization, which comes from feeling that you're heard and listened to and respected, that you are challenged, that you have a growth plan at work, that so there's all different kinds of things that companies can do that support and respect uniqueness of individuals. And they don't have to mean, it doesn't mean they have to customize 18,000 different, it's a company with 18,000 people, 18,000 different unique plans. But there are ways to go about doing that. And I give one example, which is, again, at TIFF, we had a corporate policy where every year 10 employees could apply for matching funds up to a certain amount of money to travel anywhere in the world that they wanted to go to a festival. So Dubai was often a sought after one because it's quite different than Canada. And so people would go to Berlin, they would go to the US, they would go to Asia. And you had to apply for this, and we matched it. And then the deal was that you came back and you gave a report to the organization, a brief report on what you learned and how that learning would further TIFF. So that's a way for people to express themselves in their own passions and interests. So we had lots of different variables like that. Some people might choose a training course, things like that. Another place that I worked at in tech development, it was interactive television company. After 4 years, If you stayed there for 4 years, in your 4th year, you had a 1 month paid sabbatical to do whatever you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
As a regeneration, creativity, passion filling. So different kinds of ways around that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's one question from the audience, Dorothy. She says, how do you get a toxic CEO to recognize that their toxic behavior is impacting the organization and they definitely need coaching? So, how would you do it? Though we always know it's a top down approach, yes.
Yeah, it is. So I will say on that point, thank you for the question. That's not an uncommon question.
Yeah, it's a very common one.
I absolutely support the notion that the organizational culture will transform and be more effective when the CEO and the leadership team, where there is that top-down approach. It makes it faster, it makes it easier. However, I am an absolutely firm believer that you can lead from anywhere in the organization and that you can have impact. And the underlying element that it does take courage. And I will quote Viola Davis in this. I just read her book, her recent book. Courage is the cure, and it takes courage. So the way that I would do it is to find, if your direct boss, you feel comfortable and is open to that conversation. If HR is, maybe you're in HR, but if your direct boss is open to that conversation, and if there's a channel of communication where it can be shared, find a way to share it with the CEO, I would also very much say that very specific examples must be provided. It cannot be anecdotal. It has to be specific and preferably dated, just really concrete examples, because that would be very unfair otherwise. And I would also offer up that doing a cultural assessment using a culture score is a very quick way, because on the rankings, when you get above 30%, you're starting to get rankings that say leadership needs coaching. Leadership needs more intensive coaching. And then the final one is CEO transition must go. So, and I appreciate that might not be an easy solution, because if you need the CEO to endorse that, but there are ways that I've worked sort of around this where the CEO doesn't have any idea that they're actually the problem, and they think that they're doing this for the betterment of the company, is just one example. Right. So I hope that gives some tips. It's not an easy place to be whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you are not, you're at a even middle level, and then you're finding that things are not happening, and, kind of seeing things happening, and CEOs does not, validate that his behavior is toxic, then it's very difficult for anybody even at a little down level to kind of just go and say upright or talk in a way, because one, you're coming out of your own insecurities, job, and all the things also matter to you. So I don't know how do you, because normally value, when you're building a culture, it's always a top down approach. That's what my learning has been, though you're very correctly saying if somebody is very courageous, but that courage, so I don't know how do you put that courage in a middle level manager and saying, okay, courageous, and then go back and, unless the CEO is really open for it, it's very difficult for anybody to get that kind of acceptability and change. Maybe through a process, what you mentioned is a good thought, that if, you can go to an HR and start with a cultural evaluation of an organization, and that everybody is involved, and probably that can give somebody a mirror that, okay, this is what I'm doing and this is what is required, so I think that could be one of the good approaches. That's my thought process.
Yes. And also I certainly would not, unless someone was willing to lose their job or quit, as people have done. Again, I go back to two things, that if you're willing to take that step and go in, because it would be a challenging conversation. If the CEO is just, get out kind of thing, it has to come from someone that they respect, whether it's a board member, an investor, or what have you. So it has to be different channels, but process is definitely a way to do it, as you just described, Siri. Also, I find this often in my role as an external provider, and I'm going through this right now with a client who I mentioned earlier have completely tone deaf. It is a frontline entry-level staff person that is having the courage to share with me the very specifics of dysfunction. I then have the skills, the tools, the communication ability to relay this to a CEO who is tone deaf and has no clue what to do. So that's another way, is to have an external coach or someone that can play an intermediary role.
Right. Yeah, I think that could be. And I think also just one thing more I want to just relate, because we've been into also training and coaching, and our model speaks about, helping people to navigate to their beingness. If we are all rooted in our true self, from where every value or every belief or, the kind of way you're living, if you're rooted there, probably we can be more towards creating that compassion and love for the people. Right. So even if your behavior, you at times you understand, is not really good and the people don't appreciate, and people do know it. It's not that we are not aware of our behaviors, but somehow it's kind of, you do a wishy-washy over your behavior and say, okay, this is not me, it happened. But then I think if we can do that, helping people to go inward and connect to that smallest part, that pure being, and then bring out that compassion, I think that could also be one of the biggest what do you call, a twister to the cultural change in the organization. So I don't know how it has to be done, but yes, if we can do it, it would be a great change.
Absolutely, I am a firm believer in that. And as I said, the shift between pre and post pandemic, when I started the business in 2016, my first business card that was spirituality plus love plus culture or business or whatever. And it was like, I'm saying it. And that, that didn't really get much of a response. But come full circle, it sure does now. And I'm a very big believer in introducing meditation, even short bursts of meditation at work, 2-3 minutes. 30 seconds to do a meditation before you fly off. If you think you're going to fly off the handle, take a pause and a breath. So teaching breath work, teaching meditation, teaching different modalities. So I believe in music. I believe in beauty, order, and delight within the office, plants. I worked at an organization that didn't want to show that they had money, so there was duct tape all over the floor. And what it did was it just made staff feel bad, like icky, that we have the money to have a whole rug. We don't have to tape it together. But so I believe in creating in the senses and the role of the senses. And also I believe in naps. I'm the first person that I, at work, go for a walk in a park, sit on a bench and take a 15-minute nap. I did it unashamedly. So all of the different tools. And I think the more we give permission to individuals at work, and particularly leadership. So I love what Shameen does, who was on your panel on Monday, and I've participated in her works. On Monday mornings when she's continued to do the power pause in a corporate environment. It's very powerful to give people permission. I also have the tool, I don't know if people are familiar with heart math. And heart math.
Yes.
Okay. So heart math, I have that little tool. And so if you're with an individual, you can simply put it on their thumb and demonstrate in 30 seconds how just a little pause takes their heart rate right down and calms them down. And so I believe in teaching all of these different modalities.
Very nice.
Great, Heather, that you are talking about the concepts like heart math and other things, which is a value locking the feeling of love in your heart. And we bring people to this kind of experience, and we ask what kind of energy of love you sense in and around you, and how can you hold and contain that energy and remain mindful of whatever you love to, and now operate from this way of being and find out what are your answers. Now, we use all such kind of tools even in our model, and that's how the basic Indian value system has been. Okay, everything originated from love. Okay, and this whole world has been created out of love. And when we create organization, even we create out of love, and that's how you are reinforcing something that is very fundamental to human existence. And now, my question here, in the interest of the whole audience, because they must carry with something great when today you have appeared in this short tenure with us, is that which kind of a tool and what is the authenticity of those tools? So the source and origin of the tools that you use to assess the culture and values, okay, where it come from, and what is this tool which people can learn and can use? Just let us know something about that.
Absolutely. So I have come through a circuitous route to where I am right now. So through the very practical experience that I've had, into coaching certification and having those tools. And the one thing that has helped me from a corporate standpoint is working with the Barrett Values Centre. So Richard Barrett is a foremost leader in values and worked for over 25, 30 years with the World Bank in values identification. And then he branched into consulting and so on. The man now is I met him in Oslo when he was auditing the peace process, because he now, his passion, having worked in corporate for so long, he takes this model and these tools to do work with multinationals and to do work at a country and a state level. So we've done this culture assessment twice for Canada as a nation. And
that's nice.
And he has done it with countries all around the world. And he has many, many books. The one that Evolutionary Coaching, which is a values-based approach to unleashing human potential. And so it is his deep, deep work that has developed this model. And the reason this model works is it's 10 minutes to answer. It's all online. And it is deep in analytics, 60 different languages, hundreds of thousands of individuals, I think 8,000 different companies globally. And very much PricewaterhouseCoopers has adopted the Barrett model globally, MasterCard, Canada, like Volvo. It's a very proven tool. And that's the tool that I use for cultural assessment, because when you're dealing with corporations that think culture's woo-woo, if you give them something that has a number attached to it that you can benchmark, it's invaluable.
Great, Heather, that you have shared with the audience. I'm sure they will learn a great thing from it, and they can use this tool. Let me also understand my second part of question. When we talk about value and there's a behavior, it is only behavior people observe, but what I really value is hardly get observed. This is why sometimes people, to demonstrate a value, simply change their behaviors, but they don't change what they really value. So how does your work and coaching differentiate and really reach to that level that this person is now really operating from a deep value and is just not artificial behavior?
Well, my personal belief is you can smell that a mile away, and that people can spot that a mile away, and that you can't sustain that falsehood for very long, consistent, that it will materialize somewhere. You ask a very good question, and I'm racking my brain for I mean, that is my answer, that when I have been in the presence of people that are just placating and going along with it, that somewhere there is a concrete revelation of their true self. So whether they're in the meeting and you have the meeting and they play that particular game of themselves, and then everyone steps outside the meeting and you see that they're down the hall and they're having a follow-up meeting to the meeting you just had. So that's I really would have to think. I haven't come across that in a way where it hasn't materialized tangibly. I will say, sorry, my other point of that is that I also very much believe that these behaviors need to be, depending on the organization and depending where you are in the evolution of the culture. There's been great success that I've had when you embed the expectation within performance reviews. And it can be as simple as I develop a roadmap, a culture roadmap that talks about, okay, what does accountability mean? What's the behavior that goes with it? What does it feel like? Or trust? What does it feel like when trust, like literally you get the team to speak to it. How do you feel when trust is present? I feel relaxed. I feel safe. I feel calm. How do you feel when trust isn't present? Anxious, like you're going to stab me in the back, like you think I'm worthless, you don't value me. And then we agree on, so how are you going to create behaviors where trust is present? And literally, I've put those behaviors in a performance evaluation, such that you are required, if you're going to move forward on this decision, you are required by your job description to include this person in that decision. You are stuff like that. So I believe when you're dealing with rogue individuals, you do need that kind of process that comes back to performance reviews.
I think you have answered this question in the very best manner you can, and I just want to add for the learning of the audience that when in our model we help people to integrate a value, we call it a value integration process, and it takes a lot time to really
Definitely.
integrate a value, and it takes much easier to demonstrate a behavior. So it's a lot of reflection processes we initiate people to, and there is no one else than the person himself can really know that is it really a value I'm exhibiting or a behavior I'm demonstrating. Because, like for example, I don't know how you measure that culture or the of the nation. Let's say that every person living in a country has a value of belonging to the country, but how many they really belong to, only they can assess it. So it may be difficult to measure it.
Yeah, it's not, it's an imperfect, that is a very legitimate observation. And I would defer you to Richard Barrett on that one.
Similarly, even between these spouses, okay, when you say I belong to you, okay, belonging for you, but not belonging to you. Okay.
Well, that's where in the process, and you wouldn't do it with 80 billion people in a country, but that's where in this process between two people, you have to have the conversation about what does it actually mean? What are the behaviors that indicate that?
Okay. So,
And I think it's also about, when you're living by a value, whether it's an individual or an organization, you need a lot of courage, especially people on top. And I think if that's my thought process entirely, if people become value driven, the things are so easier for the other people. As you said, it creates an environment of trust. And once you can do that, whether it's a family, whether it's your parents or your grandparents, if they show that value and they create that, they're living by that value and they're creating that environment of openness and trust, probably it can bring a huge shift in the whole organization. right?
Yeah.
Just
I,
one, if you have a few more minutes,
I was
one
just going to
question which
read
is, which,
I was just going to read a quote for
yes,
you, Siri, which I don't have,
yeah,
but
okay, please.
the gist of it
Okay.
is that when you live by values, oh, here it is.
Mhm.
Values-based
Mm.
decision making allows us to throw away our rule books. When a group of people espouse an agreed set of values and understand which behaviors support those values, then you no longer need to rely on bureaucratic procedures setting out what people should do or not do in a specific situation. All the rules reduce to one: live
Hmm.
by the values.
Yeah.
People can work out for themselves what they need to do, and in so doing, become responsible and accountable for their behaviors. So that's an ideal,
Right.
but the gist of it is that, again, values come first, because you can have the best policies and procedures, but if you don't have the values, then no, you don't have to honor
Absolutely.
them. So anyway, you had one more question.
Right,
Sorry.
right. Yeah, just just there was a question which said that we have been, in fact, now people have and organizations have also been talking about compassion, about love, and it came out in Trillion Dollar Coach. When he said, Jim Campbell, love is one of the prime things in the organization. Whereas if you had seen earlier, then the whole pandemic happened, the organizations have been totally performance driven. How much are you doing, what is the profits, or what are you going to give it back to the stakeholders, and it was totally like that. So how do you think we can really draw a line, because both have to be matched, because when you're running an organization, it has to be creating a profit for the people, employees, for the stakeholders, for the whole nation, if it's a nation building organization. But on the same time, you need to be driven by these compassion and love also. Now, I was talking to one of these CEOs, and he says, Siri, if I'm totally compassion and love driven, what do I do with the people who do not perform? If I don't tell them, or if I don't show them a way out of the organization, and it's been consistent behavior where they're not performing, and if I'm only driven by love, what do I do in that case? How do I balance it out? So what do you think we can really balance out in an organization, in a culture, when we are talking of that, we have compassion, love, but we also have performance driven. So what do you think about that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, terrific example. And I love that the leader you're dealing with raised that question to you. And I am also a believer that if the person's not a right fit and they're not performing,
Hmm.
there's a reason why they're
Hmm.
not performing. They don't have the skills. So is that on the organization, not who hasn't trained them,
Hmm.
or is that on the individual that just maybe they just hate working there? They really don't want to be there, so they're not performing. Maybe their skill set isn't suited to the job that they're given. So I think a leader who is I don't think that you need to keep people necessarily that are underperforming. I think you need to be compassionate about how that transition or exit happens in the organization. I think you need to, so one example that I recall with a colleague of mine, I didn't even know he was being transitioned out, because that's how compassionate it was, that they said, you know what, you're not performing. We'd like you to take 6 months, and we're going to help you. We're going to help you find another job, but you don't fit here, and we want to work with you. Do it in a compassionate way, um, and but I think every effort has to be made within reason to
Hmm.
really self-evaluate what's on the organization about why this person isn't performing, and is it a system, is it a lack of support, or what have you, and then when if it's the individual, then I think a compassionate exit is
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's
and
very,
and
very
I
well said,
also
very well
yeah,
put together.
I would also say on that note that another way that a leader can show compassion is to find a way when these people exit. Have you been able to introduce them to other people? Can you make sure that there's a follow-up in 3 to 6 months? I have a boss, my first boss from 25 years ago. We still have
Hmm.
lunch. Our
Hmm.
whole team, we still get together. We're like a family.
Hmm.
So I think I'm not saying a man with a leader with 18,000 people can do that, but there are
Hmm.
opportunities.
Okay.
Very,
So
very correctly
my
said.
last question, Heather, in the last 1 minute, that the tool that you use and the game that brings in of changing the culture, does it also elicit the factors which are deteriorating the culture or pulling the culture down? So does it also elicit those negative things prevailing in the current?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. It identifies those values, and so it identifies the values that are like, I don't have it here, but one could, like, it will say uh, lack of trust or disloyalty or overly complicated, or like all of those negative values are also included, and it absolutely will reveal them. The second step, though, that is what I do, and everyone has to decide how they want to do it. You then have to tease out with people through coaching. So, what does this really mean? And then you find out it's a policy, it's a toxic person, it's a procedure that is a legacy from a former CEO who was fear-based. All of that comes out.
Okay. I
Okay.
think that's a wonderful thing. And I also want to conclude this session in this manner that values are not only we stand for, values are also what we die for. So between what we stand for and what we die for is something very great to discover, and just call what we can live for. Okay. And
That was
let's
beautiful.
so because today question of living and living the organization also at the same time, and living the nation, so that everything and everyone must feel that exuberance in our liveness. We are becoming dead and stale deep within us. I think we all need a new culture globally, individually, even in ourselves, in our personal environment. And I believe, Heather, you're doing a great job. And I really wish people who have attended this and would listen later on can draw a lot of inspiration, and especially coaches can use this good game of bringing cultural transformation, okay, and to help people integrate those great values, right? Thank you very much for showing up. We are ending on a very
Thank,
good note. Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Heather. With all the love to all the people who are attending and to you, especially coming with us. And I think it was a great, great pleasure. And so, audience, you can listen to it. If you haven't done it, it will be there already on the different platforms. And see you tomorrow with another wonderful coach. And thank you, Heather, once again. See
thank
Thank
you.
you,
you, the
Siri and
audience.
Sat.
Thank you,
Thank
audience.
you, and with
Thank
love
you,
to you
everyone.
both.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.